Dear friends, welcome to another episode of Geopolitical and Military News. In this video, we will discuss an increasingly pertinent issue in modern conflicts: what is the better option? Designing and building simple, cheap equipment in large quantities, or opting for large, complex, and expensive projects? World War II went down in history as the most mechanized conflict up to that point, converting the industries of the countries involved into the most important and vital elements for the war effort. For the first time in the history of human conflicts, the number of soldiers on the battlefield was no longer seen as the main factor in the decision between victory and defeat, with other elements such as airplanes, tanks, and artillery pieces assuming this role. In September 1939, when the war began in Europe, Germany was one of the most industrialized countries in the world. However, unlike other major industrial powers of the time, such as the United States, in Germany a considerable part of its industrial complex was already fully geared towards war, which meant that at that time, at the beginning of the war, Germany had by far the largest defense industrial base in the world. Nevertheless, despite its gigantic factories, the production level was always comparatively lower, especially in comparison with the Soviet Union and the United States from 1941 and 1942 onwards. The reason for this was already well known at the time: the extreme German concern with the details and quality of what they produced in their factories. This German concern, seen by many as an authentic obsession, had a very positive side, which was the guarantee that everything that came out of the German factories had been produced with attention to detail and that all components had been adequately tested under rigorous quality controls. However, it also had a very negative side, which was a comparatively low production level. Basically, the Germans placed much more emphasis on quality in the production of large and complex projects, especially when compared to the Soviets. A typical example of this can be seen in the Panther, a medium German tank specifically made to face the Soviet T-34. The analysis of the Panthers that survived the war shows that their most important components, such as the engine, transmission, suspension, and cannon, underwent long quality control processes, with up to 5 or 6 overlapping seals indicating consecutive tests and evaluations of the same element. However, in the case of the Soviet T-34, it was very common to see tanks arriving incomplete on the battlefield or with serious mechanical problems that could have been easily avoided in the factories through a routine check. Because of this, the Soviets produced over 60,000 T-34 tanks during the war, while the Germans managed to produce only 6,000 Panther tanks. The Panther embodied the most advanced tank technology of the time, but was extremely complex and expensive to produce. Moreover, it underwent obsessive quality control, which drastically reduced the number of vehicles sent to the battlefield. The Soviets at that time said that quantity was a quality in itself, and indeed, by producing 10 times more medium tanks than the Germans, and overall almost 15 times more combat vehicles than German factories could produce, the Soviets, even with technologically simpler and quicker and cheaper to build vehicles but in large numbers, managed to defeat the Germans in World War II. The German experience in that conflict left an important question in the air that today, in the 21st century, remains very pertinent: what is more important, investing in simple and cheap projects or in complex and expensive ones? When we look at what is happening in Ukraine, we get a sense of how important the answer to this question is. In that conflict, we are seeing large and heavy 50-ton tanks being pulverized into gigantic balls of fire by small drones weighing a few kilograms, tanks costing $2 or $3 million operated by crews that had to be trained, fed, and clothed for long months, being disintegrated by a drone costing less than $300 operated by an 18-year-old who until last month spent his afternoons playing PlayStation with friends. We are seeing the same at sea, with large and powerful Russian ships worth $100 million or more being severely damaged or even sunk by naval drones costing less than $100,000. Does this mean that the era of large, expensive, and complex projects is over and that the priority now is simple but equally functional and lethal projects? The answer is no. What is happening in Ukraine and what happened over 80 years ago in World War II shows that it is necessary to have a balance between large and complex projects and simple and cheap projects. In World War II, Germany did not have this balance and ended up paying a high price for it. In that conflict, Heinz Guderian, who during the first phase of the invasion of the Soviet Union led a panzer group, upon seeing the Soviet T-34 for the first time, suggested that Germany simply copy the project entirely and mass-produce it. A suggestion that, if followed in 1941, could have given a great tactical advantage to the panzer divisions on the ground, but the Germans ignored this and other suggestions, with German leaders insisting on continuing with large and complex projects that were handed over to German industrialists, who, as I said at the beginning, were obsessed with the quality of what they produced. This lack of German flexibility played an important role in the defeat against the Allies, and that is why today, in the 21st century, armies need to be flexible, balancing large and complex projects with other simpler, cheaper, and easier to mass-produce projects. What is happening now in Ukraine shows that one of these paths lies precisely in drones, a technology that, integrated with artificial intelligence, will be able to produce relatively simple equipment with a high level of autonomy, being therefore cheap to produce and also to operate. But large and complex equipment and vehicles will continue to play their role in current and future conflicts, acting as a kind of backbone around which increasingly autonomous systems will operate. Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you liked the content, don't forget to leave your like. This helps the channel grow and reach more people. If you didn't like it, leave your dislike and explain in the comments how we can improve. Also, comment on suggestions for topics we can cover here. Insulting comments or those defending dictatorships or war criminals will be summarily blocked. Thank you for your understanding. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing by clicking the subscribe button below and hitting the bell to receive all notifications. Thanks. See you next time.